Among these so many prescribed organizations, which outfit do you think is the most dangerous and deserves timely and adequate attention over others?
TTP was perhaps the only terrorist organization in Pakistan which had global agenda, which had been involved in conducting attacks beyond Pakistan. In United States of America, in New York Times Square, there was an attempt for a botched attack.
Let's first talk about TTP. Can you share some of the key aspects of their evolution, their support base, their recruitment strategy?
TTP emerged as an unintended outcome of the American-led international intervention in Afghanistan. An unintended outcome. Specifically, after Hakimullah Mahsood replaced Baitullah Mahsood, the kind of ruthlessness that the organization demonstrated, that was unprecedented. Baitullah Mahsood was quite calculated. He knew that to retain popular support in Pakistan, it is essential that TTP avoid targeting civilians. That changed completely once Hakimullah Mahsood assumed power. He got involved in sectarian attacks. That was not the case under Baitullah's leadership. So initially, yes, Al-Qaeda inspired him to go global, to go ruthless, to go indiscriminate. But if I have to point out a single most factor that inspired TTP to become indiscriminate and ruthless, that was its association with Al-Qaeda. Another factor that multiplied Pakistan's security concerns was Afghan Taliban's ill-conceived and irrational move when they opened the Pulacharhi prison in Kabul. That one incident gave thousands of terrorist suspects a chance to, fall back in Pakistan or parts of Afghanistan and join either Daesh or TTP.
Key elements of Pakistan's counterterrorism strategy against first TTP, and then we'll discuss BLA.
Employ a combination of kinetic and non-kinetic means, but mainly relying on the kinetic part. And if I have to choose between kinetic and non-kinetic means, kinetic means would only serve 20% of Pakistan's total counterinsurgency policy in Balochistan. But simultaneously, we should also initiate a grand national dialogue to basically respond to those set of grievances of the Baloch people.
What are the three most important challenges that Pakistan faces?
Absence of national consensus on the issue, capacity of the institutions, inability to create a regional consensus or cultivate regional support to act against terrorism.
Viewers, very warm welcome to another episode of V News English program Perspectives, in which we offer before you a very informed and insightful perspective on issues which are very critical for international peace, security, and economy. So today, we are joined by one of the leading experts on countering violent extremism as well as counterterrorism studies, a leading authority on this subject, Dr. Khuram Iqbal. He's a celebrated author, extensively published around the world, and has done path-breaking and pioneering work in Pakistan, which is very valued and respected among the policy quarters. So thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Khuram Iqbal.
It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. We recently had a major attack in Balochistan on Jafar Express, and Pakistan has witnessed a major surge in terrorist attacks, and that led to an important meeting based on these attacks between the civil and military leadership at the National Security Committee of Parliament. And it seems that the political and military leadership are determined to act decisively against some of the major terror outfits operating inside Pakistan. You are an expert on this subject for many, many years. In your view, um, among these so many prescribed organizations, which outfit do you think is the most dangerous and deserves timely and adequate attention over others?
Traditionally, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan has been responsible for roughly 70 to 75% of terrorist attacks in Pakistan since 2001. That is why this group has received a lot of attention from the government when it comes to its counterinsurgency strategy. It was also not only the frequency of the attacks that TTP has conducted, but it was also the scale of its activities as well. TTP was perhaps the only terrorist organization in Pakistan which had global agenda, which had been involved in conducting attacks beyond Pakistan. When the American-led international forces were stationed in Afghanistan, TTP conducted some of the deadliest attacks there. Then in United States of America, in New York Times Square, there was an attempt for a botched attack. Then there was one in Barcelona, and there's a long list of TTP's intent and capabilities to go global. So that is why the government of Pakistan has always prioritized this group when it comes to the counterinsurgency or counterterrorism operations. Secondly, the most lethal and deadly terrorist organization in terms of lethality and frequency, there have been the ethno-nationalist terrorist organizations operating from Balochistan. But gradually we are seeing that the capacity of ethno-nationalist militants in Balochistan is gradually increasing. The kind of sophistication that they are showing in their attacks, it shows that soon they will be able to overshadow Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan as the deadliest terrorist organization in Pakistan. But there is one important development from a policy perspective as well. Traditionally, we used to treat these two groups into two distinct categories, but that is no longer the case. During last 2 to 3 years, we have seen the cross-fertilization of ideas, of logistics, of fighters. Now, there have been instances where the ethno-nationalists and the Islamists, led by TTP and Al-Qaeda, they are actually joining forces to target the Pakistani state and Pakistani society. So that is an alarming trend. This we have not witnessed in the past. They used to abhor each other for ideological reasons, but gradually it seems that a common enemy, which is of course the state and society of Pakistan, is bringing them together. Is this totally organic? I have my doubts because at times there have been indications where some external forces have been trying to impose this cohesion among these ideologically apart terrorist organizations. So that is one. Secondly, in case of Balochistan, we are observing that the popular support for terrorist organization has increased in a spectacular manner. It has its own sets of reasons, but once a terrorist organization is endowed with popular support, it means more recruitment, it means more finances, and it means sophisticated capability. So that is why during last 1 year we have seen that BLA and its affiliated organizations, they have been able to lay siege on the cities, hold them for many hours. They have been able to conduct coordinated attacks in different parts of the province simultaneously. And then this high-profile terrorist attack that we have seen on the Jafrabad Express, it requires a lot of sophistication. So these are some alarming trends, I think, that the state has to pay attention when it comes to its counterinsurgency
So
policy.
let's try to understand both these outfits individually and their evolution. Let's first talk about TTP. Can you share some of the key aspects of their evolution, their support base, their recruitment strategy?
TTP emerged as an unintended outcome of the American-led international intervention in Afghanistan. an unintended outcome. When the international forces came into Afghanistan, there was a lot of blowback and reaction from the Pakistani society. There was a sense of paranoia in the society, which the terrorist organizations manipulated to the maximum. There was this misperception rather, that after Afghanistan, the American forces are going to come and attack Pakistan. So this sense of paranoia was manipulated by Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, which projected itself as a defensive militant organization, which is only aimed at waging defensive jihad against the American forces in Afghanistan. And they, at least rhetorically, they said that they're only going to conduct defensive attacks inside Pakistan. But gradually we have seen during last 10 to 15 years that they have long given up that defensive posture. Specifically after Hakimullah Mahsood replaced Baitullah Mahsood, the kind of ruthlessness that the organization demonstrated, that was unprecedented. Baitullah Mahsood was quite calculated. He knew that to retain popular support in Pakistan, it is essential that TTP avoid targeting civilians. That is why under Baitullah Mahsood's leadership, there was a time when the popular support for TTP in entire Pakistan was quite high. In 2008, there was a survey conducted by an international organization, and we were shocked to see the results that roughly 35 to 40% of Pakistanis had sympathetic view towards TTP. It was mainly because of the resentment that the people have towards United States of America, and then of course TTP's careful target selection also had some role to play. But that changed completely once Hakimullah Mahsood assumed power. He got involved in sectarian attacks. That was not the case under Baitullah's leadership, because once when the sectarian war was going on in Khuram and Dera Ismail Khan during Baitullah's time, he was approached by the sectarian terrorist organization to send his fighters to target the rival sect.
So what was the incentive for TTP to indulge in sectarianism?
It was mainly because of the influence of Al-Qaeda. Somehow Baitullah Mahsood was able to manage that influence and to keep Al-Qaeda on a distance. But Hakimullah Mahsood was not as strategic in his approach. He happened to be more ambitious than Baitullah Mahsood. So initially, yes, Al-Qaeda inspired him to go global, to go ruthless, to go indiscriminate, but that proved counterproductive for TTP in the longer run. Because under Al-Qaeda's influence, when TTP started targeting the civilian targets in Pakistan, so that popular support reversed altogether. When the people of Pakistan in general and the people of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and FATA in particular, they saw TTP conducting attacks in the bazaars, in the mosques, targeting funerals and schools. So this public sentiment radically transformed, and that became quite adverse to Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. So if I have to point out a single most factor that inspired TTP to become indiscriminate and ruthless, that was its association with Al-Qaeda, and that cost them dearly as well. But somehow the government of Pakistan back then was able to capitalize on this change of sentiment, was able to capitalize on this popular support. In 2014, we saw decisive operations by the government of Pakistan, and they were mainly successful because of the popular support that the military operations had at that time. So, but unfortunately, from 2015 to 2019, yes, there was a dip in the number of attacks. There was a decline in number of attacks, but somehow we were not able to sustain those gains against Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, and one bad policy decision reversed those gains.
I think, let me ask you, you just mentioned, reversal of those gains. I was talking to a former National Security Advisor of Pakistan yesterday, and he was also of the view that the gains which were made with a lot of sacrifices and a lot of efforts have unfortunately not been sustained, particularly in KPK. What are the key factors which have led to those gains and sacrifices which were made after SWAT operation and so many other operations were not durable?
One bad policy decision that I'm referring here, that was in 2021 when the government of Pakistan decided to engage TTP in dialogue. No government talks to the terrorists when they are on the run. The military have successfully put them on defensive. TTP was surviving for its survival. Was they were hiding in Afghanistan. But I don't know what kind of considerations were there in 2021 when the government of Pakistan at that time decided to re-engage them into
So you
dialogue.
are basically arguing that this decision to engage TTP into 2021 in a dialogue essentially and effectively provided them a sigh of relief.
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, yes. It was an organization which was on the run, but when the government started dialogue with them, TTP used that time to recuperate and reorganize. Under the deal back then, roughly 5 to 6,000 of TTP fighters were allowed to return to Pakistan with their families and with their weapons. So when we talk about counterterrorism strategy now in 2025, first we have to examine who were the drivers and forces and factors behind that ill-conceived policy. And until we do a post-mortem, until we do some introspection of some of the bad decisions, we are not going to ensure that we will not repeat the mistakes that we have done in the past. But unfortunately, there is no retrospection, there's no introspection on part of us to examine as to who was actually advocating rapprochement with TTP at that time. What was the rationale and what was the logic behind that? There is this tendency in Pakistan to blame one particular political party which was ruling Pakistan at that time. But we have to admit that once PTI government was gone, PDM also endorsed that dialogue with Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan in the parliament. And once it was scuttled abruptly, there was simply no clue as to why it has happened. So for a futuristic and sustainable and result-oriented counterterrorism strategy, we first have to examine what went wrong in 2021.
Recently, there has been several incidents in which some religious scholars and ulama have been targeted, including some belonging to JUI. What could be the possible reason for that?
It's mainly because Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, on one side, it has been receiving support from Afghan Taliban. And secondly, it has also forged operational and ideological linkages with Islamic State Khorasan province. The attacks that you are particularly mentioning, most of these attacks have been claimed by Islamic State Khorasan province. Most of the
including
fighters,
the one at Madrasa Haqqaniya.
Madrasa Haqqaniya, and number of other attacks on JUIF leadership as well, because Daesh believes that these religious constituencies are not adequately Islamic and they are the main hurdle in the implementation of their version of Sharia. That's why as a mission it is targeting, and most of the cadre base for ISK is composed of the former fighters of Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan or Lashkar-e-Jhangvi. So that one decision that I was talking about, that gave TTP enough time not only to seek support, cross-border support from Afghan Taliban, but also to forge linkages with the Daesh as well. And again, another factor that multiplied Pakistan's security concerns was Afghan Taliban's ill-conceived and irrational move that they chose Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan over their relations with Pakistan. So when they were taking over Kabul, one bad move on their side when they opened the Pulacharhi prison in Kabul, that one incident gave thousands of terrorist suspects a chance to, fall back in Pakistan or parts of Afghanistan and join either Daesh or TTP. So this guy, Sharifullah, who has been recently arrested by Pakistan and handed over to United States of America, he was one prominent Daesh fighter who was apprehended by the former Afghan government. And when Taliban came into power, when they released those thousands of fighters, Sharifullah was one of them. And then we saw that he wreaked havoc. Similarly, number of commanders, including Maulvi Fakir and many others associated with Lashkar-e-Islam and TTP, they were released in that particular incident. And since then, we saw Pakistan trying to take Afghan Taliban on board to act decisively against TTP, but each time we have been told that Afghan Taliban, that we have our own limitations, we can't really act against them, and we can only facilitate a dialogue between the government of Pakistan and TTP, which is of course not happening, but that is an indirect admission on part of Afghan Taliban that TTP continues to operate from its safe sanctuaries in Afghanistan. Because when this dialogue took place in 2021, it took place in Host, where most of the TTP fighters and commanders were hiding. And since 2021, many of prominent TTP commanders have been killed in Afghanistan. So I think our expectations from Afghan Taliban, they have not been fulfilled. They have not acted pragmatically, and that is complicating it for Pakistan.
Dr. Saab, can you simply explain the nature of relationship between ISKP, TTP and Afghan Taliban?
When it comes to Afghan Taliban and ISKP, they are ideologically opposed to each other. Afghan Taliban, it was believed that would prove a potent force against Daesh. Yes, they have conducted some sort of attacks again to eliminate Daesh infrastructure from Afghanistan, but ISK's trajectory clearly shows that those operations have not been successful. They have been futile, because the number of attacks conducted by ISK, not only in Pakistan, but Afghanistan, Central Asia, Moscow, Iran, they have increased. And officially in 2024, Daesh, or ISK, Islamic State Khorasan province, has emerged as the deadliest terrorist organization in the world, with roughly 70 to 75% of terrorist attack being attributed or claimed by ISK. So it means Afghan Taliban have the will, but they do not have the capacity to act against ISK. But when it comes to TTP and Afghan Taliban, the nature of relation is quite different. Afghan Taliban and TTP, they are ideologically cousins. Afghan Taliban refused to act against TTP because of the same ideology. And of course, they are they have sought some favors from TTP as well during their anti-American jihad from 2001 and onwards, when TTP actually supported Afghan Taliban. So they're bound by the principle of reciprocity, that now TTP needs us, so we have to return the favor that they have given us. Secondly, there is this fear among Afghan Taliban that if they act with force, using coercive manners against TTP, that can push thousands of TTP fighters to join ISK. So that is another reason that Afghan Taliban are reluctant to act against TTP despite growing international pressure.
So when we talk about ISKP, you mentioned there is a fear within Afghan Taliban that some of its rank and file could join ISKP. What could be the reason or incentive for other terrorist organizations to join ISKP, which has a different ideology? So can you explain their agenda, their philosophy and recruitment strategy?
In the past, ISK or Daesh's Khorasan province came to this region with lots of funds. They had bags full of dollars looted from their newly captured areas in Middle East. So they offered a financial incentive to the terrorist organizations in Pakistan to join them. But that is no longer the case, because Daesh has lost its territory in the Middle East. So now I think one reason that Daesh, and there's a lot of cross-fertilization between and among these groups of different ideologies, that is their resentment and anger vis-a-vis Pakistan. So there is a common enemy which is bringing them together.
So what is ISKP's grievance against Pakistan?
ISKP sees Pakistan, of course, it is in line with their international agenda to create a bastion of a center of caliphate. They failed in Middle East. and they seek to perhaps replicate that model in the Pakistan-Afghanistan region. Why? Because more weak are the state systems, it creates a state of anarchy which favors terrorist organizations. So ISK may be trying to replicate what it has done in Iraq and Sham, that they first targeted the government systems there, the state system and institutions there, and once they were weakened, the ISK, Daesh, took over the control of those areas. So that could be one possible reason. And second is that they justify attacking Pakistan by framing the government of Pakistan as eyes and ears of the American imperial system, because they believe that Pakistan has supported the international community or United States of America, to be specific, in the global war on terror against Al-Qaeda and Daesh.
So, can you identify some important lessons that Pakistan can draw based on the international and regional experience with Daesh in Syria and Iraq, which we can benefit from in terms of shaping a better counterterrorism strategy?
Well, first of all, our counterterrorism strategy has to appreciate the complexities of the threat spectrum that we have just discussed. We should avoid going from a one-fit-all strategy. We cannot have a set of interventions that we can replicate in case of TTP, Daesh, and Afghan Taliban. So when it comes to Daesh, certainly Pakistan's law enforcement response, we have to admit, has been efficient. The number of attacks conducted by ISK has comparatively remained low, considering the kind of favorable ideological infrastructure they had in Pakistan. There were fears that they would expand exponentially in the country, but somehow there have been attacks, but not to that level where it becomes a really alarming threat for Pakistan. Our priority group is Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. And to counter Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, of course, we should avoid repeating the past mistakes, number one. Number two, with Afghanistan, where TTP is enjoying its safe sanctuaries, we have to use our carrot and stick policy. When we use coercion against Afghan Taliban or TTP's targets inside Afghanistan, it is essential that we also maintain some leverages for Afghan Taliban to incentivize them to act against TTP. And those leverages could be economic interdependence. Second leverage could be the Afghan migrants here. But it seems that gradually we are losing those leverages, and gradually it seems to be a complete state of collapse between the two governments, which will bode ill for regional security in the time to come.
In the last part of our program, let's discuss some ways which you could recommend or identify could form key elements of Pakistan's counterterrorism strategy against first TTP, and then we'll discuss BLA.
About TTP, this is a kind of organization which does not operate with popular support. It is an organization which is ideologically driven, and it will again be counterproductive to initiate any sort of dialogue with TTP. So we have to employ a combination of kinetic and non-kinetic means, but mainly relying on the kinetic part. And when we when we talk about the kinetic part, of course, the most part of the problem related to TTP, it lies in Afghanistan. And how do you ensure that Afghanistan actually acts against TTP? You have tried coercion, you have tried to, but it seems it is not working. So there is a dead end that we are actually facing, and I'm afraid that I'll not have any convenient answers to your question as to how to act against TTP sanctuaries inside Afghanistan when Afghan Taliban refuses to do so.
What about BLA?
Well, about BLA, is a completely different phenomena. I avoid using the term terrorism while it comes to ethno-nationalist insurgency in Balochistan. Yes, of lately, BLA has demonstrated characteristics of operating as a ruthless terrorist organization, but The entire ethno-nationalist insurgency in Balochistan is driven by some valid and genuine sense of grievances. It's been, 78 years of continuous neglect on part of the central government that has created a sense of distrust in Balochistan vis-a-vis the central government. So when it comes to Balochistan, if I have to choose between kinetic and non-kinetic means, uh, kinetic means would only serve 20% of Pakistan's total counterinsurgency policy in Balochistan. 80% resources, strategic attention has to be devoted on socio-political and economic development of Balochistan. So when we talk about recent National Security Committee's meeting in the parliament, yes, there have been emphasis to use kinetic means, which must go hand in hand with non-kinetic means, but simultaneously we should also initiate a grand national dialogue to basically respond to those set of grievances of the Baloch people.
In the National Security Committee meeting in the Parliament, on several occasions, the military leadership has said that there are several aspects of the National Action Plan which are non-kinetic but are very important, such as madrasa registration, such as sending back the illegal migrants, and so many other aspects as well. What do you think is, preventing their adequate and timely implementation?
Only a few months ago, we did a program together on the madrasa reforms in Pakistan. But do we actually know what happened to that reform agenda? There was a lot of political dispute and controversy by the Pakistani religious political parties. The same religious political party which has been recently targeted by the terrorist organization was at the forefront of opposing the religious reform. I think the main reason that hinders our counterterrorism agenda is this it's this national disunity on the issue of counterterrorism. The center talks about one thing and the provincial governments talk about a different thing. Central government talks about one thing and its allies, especially the religious political parties, that they have an entirely different agenda. Take, for example, the center's decision to repatriate illegal Afghan refugees from Pakistan and how the PTI government in KP has responded to that. So the first and most important is to generate a national consensus. And that national consensus means that no politics on the issue of national security. And that is what exactly the army chief has said in his statement. So how do you ensure that? It's easier said than done. The most affected or the worst hit province of Pakistan by terrorism has been Khyber Pakhtunkhwa for last many years. There have been issues of bad governance which actually create an environment which is conducive for the growth of terrorist organization. Secondly, the kind of narrative, unfortunately, that is being generated by the provincial government there, they're trying to frame this entire terrorism as a big conspiracy by certain segments in the center to dislodge PTI government. That is not the case. Terrorism threatens Pakistan's existence. But if you continue to frame it otherwise, you are creating confusion among people. And when people are confused, terrorist organization, they take benefit from that. For example, within KPK, the worst affected areas are from the South KPK, the same districts where the Chief Minister of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa comes from. So that questions his will and capacity about countering terrorism.
My last question, Dr. Saab. In your knowledge and experience, what are the three most important challenges that Pakistan faces in satisfactorily and decisively succeeding against the rising threat of terrorism?
Three challenges, of course: absence of national consensus on the issue, capacity of the institutions, And third, our inability to create a regional consensus or cultivate regional support to act against terrorism. If we have talked about the national consensus when it comes to the inability of the institutions. There has been times when the number of police departments, they even did not have the DNA, testing facilities available to them to identify the suicide bombers. Punjab first took the lead, and then it shared those facility and laboratories with the other provinces as well. So thank God now we are able to identify the suicide bombers belonging to different. So it does not end here. There is an issue related to judiciary. Until recently, 95% of terrorist attack they go scot free from our courts. Why? Because the courts, they cite a poor evidence collection system, but again, the element of fear is also quite prevalent, that the judges are usually reluctant to decide the terrorism cases on merit. That's why you had to take many cases of counterterrorism to the military courts to avoid that element of fear. But still, the acquittal rate in the terrorism cases still remains somewhere around 90%. So that is about the institutional flaws. And when it comes to generating a regional consensus, we have done well with Iran, but when it comes to counterterrorism, there have been a lot of instances of cooperation between Iran and Pakistan. But I think there's a lot that needs to be done between Pakistan and China, because now the terrorist organizations, especially in Balochistan, they're also targeting the Chinese interests as well. But for some strange reasons, China is not endorsing Pakistan's perspective of BLA receiving external support from Pakistan's adversaries. BLA has been banned by the United States of America, by the way, but China openly, it has not extended its diplomatic support for Pakistan's perspective on BLA. Secondly, there is no formal intelligence sharing mechanism between China and Pakistan, and some sort of distrust is gradually growing, which I think must be addressed before it's too late. And then Afghanistan, I would again say that yes, when it comes to eliminating TTP's safe sanctuaries, it has to be a combination of kinetic and non-kinetic means. When it comes to non-kinetic means, we have to depend and rely on our economic and political leverages, diplomatic leverages, to convince Afghan Taliban to act against TTP.
Khuram, thank you so much for sparing your time and sharing your very valuable, insightful analysis on this critical regional and national security issue. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Viewers, this was today's program, Perspectives. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to share your feedback and comments, and keep watching V News English. Thank you so much.